Hello, Dimitro.
Yes, hi, Anna. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I see that also Alexander is here.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Alexander. Good evening. Tatiana, please advise if we need to wait for anybody else from your side.
Доброго дня ще раз. В принципі, я думаю, що ми можемо починати.
Hello, everyone. I think we can begin. We invited some media representatives through our media communication service. We also had a session of the city council. So we invited members of the city council. We can see that the mayor of the city and the head of the city council is with us. So we can make the recording this time and share it with representatives of the media who were invited and the city councilors.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tatiana, for the introductions. Gennady, please do proceed to making the recording so that we can also share this with part of our team members that are not present today due to the holiday vacations. So the objective for today's meeting is to see the milestone presentation by Land Studio regarding the strategies for landscape and natural environments. So without further ado, I think that we can begin looking at the list of participants. And then maybe after the presentation is over, we can hear questions and feedbacks from our Ukrainian colleagues. So I would now give the word to Margarita Pascucci and Chiara Galimberti. Thank you, girls.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon to everyone. I share my screen. Okay, just advise me if you can see it properly.
Yes, we see the screen.
Okay, perfect. So good afternoon and thank you for being here today. For today's meeting, we are going to present our analytical and strategic work that we carried out in the last 2 months for the first phase related to landscapes and natural environments of the city of Mykolaiv. So this first phase, both the analytical and the strategic work, is propedeutic for the next project phases, and it allowed us to get a deeper understanding of the ecological network and of the green spaces of the city, and it led to conclusions and proposals that we are going to see today and that will be useful as starting point for the discussion and for the next project phase. So I briefly present again our office. Land is an office of consultancy and landscape architecture present today in 4 countries and active since 33 years. All the offices include people with different professional background and professional skills such as architects, landscape architects, engineers, and agronomists. And the objective of our work is to create livable spaces for communities and for the society. So for the purpose of this presentation, we have abstracted some excerpts of the final document that will be delivered to you in order to present you how this document is structured. So in order to easily follow the presentation in English, you can refer to the blue boxes, while in order to follow the Ukrainian translation, you can refer to the light blue boxes. If something is really unclear, please feel free to stop us, but for sure we will have time later for questions. So this is the index of the document related to landscape and natural environment that will be submitted to you. The document is divided in 5 chapters. The first chapter is a survey of national and regional environmental systems with the aim of contextualizing the landscape strategy in the existing environmental context of the region and of the nation. The second chapter contains a more deep analysis on the environmental system, ecological network, and green spaces at the scale of the city, at the scale of Mykolaiv. The third chapter is related to an understanding of the main vocation and main potential of the city of Mykolaiv. The fourth chapter contains then the strategic guidelines, such as strategic actions at urban scale related to the main environmental systems of the city, but also at the scale of individual green spaces. While the fifth chapter is an appendix where global, European, and Ukrainian megatrends and policies related to the environment have been studied and have been reported, and also case studies of relevant urban regeneration strategies are presented here to support the strategy and to establish and to suggest benchmarks for Mykolaiv regeneration. In the presentation, we will show some excerpts of this document, but in a different order for the purpose of the speech. So before to give the word to my colleague Chiara, I just want to point out that all the materials that we are displaying, that we are showing today, and we use for the purpose of the document are based on the material and on the feedbacks that we have received from you, from the municipality, and that we have reinterpreted as follows. So all the documentation produced will be sent to the city so that you can give us your feedback and comments and suggest issues to be integrated in the next phases of the work. So now I give the floor to Chiara, who is going to present the first analytical phase of the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Margherita, and good afternoon to everyone. Today, we face many challenges linked to the rapid digitalization, demographic change, but above all, climate change. Climate change is a global phenomenon affecting and inflicting major consequences on landscapes. As we can see in the graphics, the average temperature of Mykolaiv city increased drastically in the last decades. Some of the impacts of a changing climate already observed mainly affects ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity, but also our daily lives. History, identity, freedom are the principles and first steps towards Mykolaiv's approach to the landscape regeneration strategy. The post-industrial heritage can become a starting point for the formation of a modern city silhouette in which preserved elements can become expressive spatial highlights. The creation of a unified framework of open green spaces that starts from Mykolaiv's water flows will have a positive impact on the formation of ecological corridors, improve the orientation of citizens, and allow them to get to know the nature of their homeland. Green and blue infrastructure can give a strong identity to public places, allowing residents to recognize their city as their own. Freedom comes also from having a choice. With our landscape strategy, we want to create a structure that can evolve and change over time as a response to the modern demands of society. For a better understanding of the future development of our landscape strategy and the context in which it is inserted, we want to start today's presentation from current megatrends and international policies on sustainability. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, based on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted in 2015 by 193 UN member countries, has made sustainable development a top priority in the world economy. Among the main objectives worthy of note are the reduction in consumption of energy, water, and soil, the preservation and regeneration of natural ecosystems, the minimization of emissions, and improvement of underdeveloped urban conditions. The sustainable vision of Ukraine's development up to 2030 covers such targets as public welfare and health, being supported by innovative economic development built on the sustainable use of natural resources. Focusing on the Sustainable Development Goal number 15, the national program is to establish the national ecological. Sorry, I can hear myself. Okay. Focusing on the Sustainable Development Goal number 15, the national program to establish the national ecological network is not fully implemented and must be addressed. Since most of the national territory is in degraded or polluted condition, the establishing of an environmental network, designating territories as natural reserves, and creating conservation zones of international importance are approaches for preserving biodiversity that have to be pursued. The European Green Deal, launched by the European Commission December 2019, is a package of policy initiatives which aims to set the EU on the path to a green transition, with the ultimate goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. It underlines the need for a holistic and cross-sectoral approach in which all relevant policy areas contribute to the ultimate climate-related goal. The package includes initiatives covering the climate, the environment, energy, transport, industry, agriculture, and sustainable finance, all of which are strongly interlinked. Europe's nature is in alarming decline. More than 60% of its soils are unhealthy and 81% of habitats in poor conditions. That's why on the 12th of July, the European Parliament voted in favor of the nature restoration law. The new measures go beyond simply preserving existing species and ecosystems. The law tasks the EU members countries with finding ways to restore large tracts of damaged forests, wetlands, and fields, as well as rivers, lakes, and oceans, with an overall goal over the next few decades of restoring 20% of damaged ecosystems. Biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are one of the biggest threats that we have to face in the next decade. Another ambition and long-term plan to protect nature and reverse the degradation of ecosystem is the biodiversity strategy. Together with the soil strategy, it will contribute to the objectives of the European Green Deal to achieve climate neutrality, a clean and circular economy, and to halt desertification and land degradation, providing healthy food and safeguard human health. Many are the strategies at national level. The ones he reported face the topic of sustainable reconstruction towards a greener and human-centered 15-minute city, based especially on proximity, as well as strategies to comply with UN and European environment-related standards regarding energy and infrastructures, such as the construction and restoration of sustainable, reliable, and safe centralized water, drainage, and heating systems. After the analysis of the strategic context, we focused on the territorial analysis starting from the natural system at national level. Ukraine hosts about 35% of Europe's biodiversity, a richness that can be explained by the great variety of ecosystems, river and coastal wetlands, woods and steppes, as well as with the great fertility of soil and the key position in the migratory routes. This variety of ecosystems is at risk due to economic activities, war, and climate change, and this must be countered through proper planning. The Mykolaiv region lies within two physical geographical zones, the forest steppe and the steppe in the basin of the southern Bug River downstream. The region is characterized by a wide variety of landscapes, mainly concentrated in its regional and national parks, such as forests, rivers, and water streams that create valleys, wetlands, and marshes, steppe grasslands rich of protected species, lignans and sandy dunes along the Black Sea coastline. Beside the information that could be found on the internet, some important documents were provided by the municipality, such as Mykolaiv Region Development Strategy for the period up to 2027, and the regional report on the state of environment in the Mykolaiv region in 2021. What emerged mainly from this analysis is the high consumption of land for agricultural development and the low share of protected areas in the region. It is urgent to improve and depollute the state of atmospheric air and improve the environmental condition of all the water bodies. From the large-scale analysis, we passed to the municipality of Mykolaiv. As a first step to better comprehend the territory, a subdivision in macro-landscape areas was undertaken. The different zones were divided according to their extension, uniformity, and characteristics into the hydrographic system with its rivers, wetlands, water detention basin, and water channels, the built environment system, including buildings, roads, and infrastructures, the border landscapes divided into agricultural, forested, grassland, and nature reserve fund areas, and the urban green space system that encloses all the green areas for public use, limited use, and special purpose, as well as the green land for cottages as indicated in the General Plan of 2019. To better understand the natural potential of the city, a first layout of the ecological network was carried out. The ecological network is an interconnected system of habitats whose biodiversity must be safeguarded. The ecological network is also a tool aimed to mitigate habitats fragmentation and to ensure the permanence of the ecosystem processes and the connectivity for sensitive species. Within the municipality, the following types of ecological valuable areas have been identified. The main river axis, as well as the water canals, identify the main ecological corridors. Areas in dark green correspond to areas of greater ecological value, such as forests, grasslands, formation, and wetlands. And areas in light green correspond to the system of urban green areas, green axes, and parks that nowadays identify situation of punctual naturality whose location is strategic for the identification and systemization of the landscape network. An essential part of this ecological network and of the landscapes of Mykolaiv is the hydrographic system. Surface waters consist of the southern Bug and Ingol rivers and the Batsky estuary. The two river coastlines are affected by coastal erosion as a result of the action of waves and the rise of the groundwater level. That's why in the future it is proposed by the city to secure the shores along almost the entire length of the southern Bug and Ingol rivers. The hydrographic system of Mykolaiv consists also of the river's wetlands formations, of the water channels that are partially overground and partially also canalized underground, according to the landscape plan, and the water reservoir and hydrological reserve of local importance actually dismissed. To better understand the relationship between the city and its rivers, schematic sections were developed. What emerged is that more than a half of the Bug and Ingol coastline is inaccessible or partially accessible due to industry, infrastructure, or residential land use that seal the access to the waterfront. Accessible and more naturalistic waterfronts are mostly located in the central and northern part of the city. The second macro landscape system described is the one of the border landscapes, so called because of their position along the borders of the city. These main natural and semi-natural formations of the city consist of forests, grasslands, and agricultural areas, and main areas of the Nature Reserve Fund. As appointed by the municipality, some of these areas, although currently characterized by natural landscapes, have been allocated to private stakeholders for future urban interventions. These developments have been reported in the map, and it is evident that this will lead to a significant reduction in the natural areas of the city. Another important macro landscape system analyzed is the one of the urban green spaces. It includes all the green areas for public use, for limited use, and for special purpose listed in the General Plan of 2019. For a better understanding of Mykolaiv's urban green spaces, an analysis and categorization has been carried out by subdividing all the green spaces in the three aforementioned categories. Following this, and on the basis of the data provided by the municipality and analysis work produced by OneWorks, a further subdivision for each category was made. This served to identify and point out all the existing typologies of green spaces of the city. This analysis led to the creation of an abacus, a collection of all the green spaces subdivided by the 3 categories of the General Plan of 2019. In this page, we can see the different public green spaces. Some of the categories, such as the public parks and the green squares, were already present in the General Plan. Some new categories, such as the linear parks or the accessible wetlands, were added to highlight the specific character and importance of these areas. In addition to the aforementioned categorization, the areas designated by the General Plan of 2019 as potential expansion for the green public spaces have been mapped and analyzed. Some of them have a good potential to upgrade the endowment of public green spaces in areas that lack this service the most, as we will see in the next pages. We analyzed the endowment of public green spaces of the city in order to see the actual condition of accessibility for the citizens. To do this, we created a map with different buffers of influence, starting from each public green area. The buffers correspond to a 15-minute walk, referring to the 15-minute city model, and to a 5-minute walk that coincides to 300-meter radius, referring to indications from the World Health Organization. As shown in the 2 maps on the right, accessibility to public green areas in 5 minutes by foot is not guaranteed for many residential areas, more or less spread evenly throughout the city, while accessibility in 15 minutes covers the urban fabric quite well, highlighting the lack of accessibility to public green areas, especially in residential areas located north, south, and west of the city. Also, the green spaces of limited use were divided into different subcategories. Worth of notice is for sure the semi-public green spaces related to the residential land use, classified following OneWorks analysis in order to understand the different typologies of semi-public green spaces within the city. Finally, the special purpose green spaces have been classified and analyzed. This category considers the road green, the cemeteries, and other green areas for the mitigation of infrastructures or polluted areas. The 2 categories represented on this page were the 2 ones that we could map and analyze starting from the data received. With the purpose of drawing conclusions from the analysis of the macro landscape systems, 3 charts of values have been drawn up. The maps related to the hydrographic system, the urban green space system, and the border landscapes want to highlight the different criticalities and potentialities of each system gathered during the analysis. This comprehension leads to targeted actions and proposed synergic and calibrated intervention within the landscape development, enhancement, and conservation strategies. Criticalities and potentialities emerge from the hydrographic system analysis are the inaccessibility or partial accessibility of several waterfront areas due to the presence of residential, infrastructural, industrial areas, or also due to the lack of cyclopedestrian connections. These areas can represent in future a potential attractor by implementing the accessibility, preserve and enhance the existing natural fronts and wetlands. The possible enhancement of the canal system will also be an important part of the ecological, environmental, and recreational network, improving the quality of life of Mykolaiv's residents. Existing natural areas represent nowadays a potential to be developed and activated to allow a quality fruition by users. Panoramic spots, points of historical interest, and areas for marinas will represent hotspots, enriching also the touristic offer of the municipality. An important issue to be addressed is the flooding risk concerning different parts of the territory. Although it can be seen as a differentiated, innervated green mesh that spreads throughout the city's neighborhoods, the urban green space network is characterized by fragmentation and lack of quality. By implementing the endowment and connections between areas, also through slow mobility access and regenerating the existing areas, a dense green network can be generated, bringing benefits for the whole urban fabric and its inhabitants. Another potentiality connected to the urban green space system is the fact that main green areas of the urban fabric that already constitute important hotspots of the ecological network and landmarks for citizens can be implemented. Road infrastructures have the potential to become urban-scale ecological corridors, counteracting also the infrastructural limits to the ecological continuity. Border landscapes, defined as such because of their localization, but also because of their low accessibility and usability, enclose different potentialities and criticalities. They represent a natural, cultural, and social resource to be preserved and enhanced, not only for their ecosystem value, but also as local recreational areas. It is important to state that the risk of sealing ecological corridors between river and inland due to new urban development forecasts must be addressed and reduced in future planning. Connections between these spaces and the city center or the hydrographic system must be implemented to make the area more accessible and easily maintained. Now I will leave the word to my colleague Margherita Pascucci that will explain to you our strategical approach.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you very much. So after the analysis, after the given analysis on the urban fabric and following this general understanding of the history of the city, but also of the green spaces of the city and of the structure of the city, we try to interpret the city as a complex system which is composed of several stratified levels, and these levels identify the vocation of the city of Mykolaiv, its DNA. And by understanding and pulling out this vocation, we want to identify the potential starting point for the landscape regeneration strategy. So in these three sketches, the three levels of the city of Mykolaiv are pointed out and are as follows: the rivers and riverfronts, the urban grid, and the urban poles that now I will explain. So the first level are the two rivers, the Ingul and Bug rivers, that are part of the identity of the city of Mykolaiv and represent its DNA and the element from which the landscape regeneration strategy needs to arise, not only because of their importance from the social and economic point of view, but also from the ecological point of view. So Mykolaiv needs to strengthen this image of a river city and needs to build up its future vision, restarting from the rivers. For this purpose, the land uses of the riverfronts are shown in this map. The rivers have developed, of course, in different ways through the centuries, coming up to today with the criticalities and potentialities that we mentioned before. So, of course, we have to look at their condition today and at what the riverfront offer in terms of land usage and in terms of punctual occasions in order to build up a realistic strategy for their regeneration. Then the second layer that adds a new step in the city construction is its urban grid, highlighted here in the map. This is a very important layer because it gives the structures to the city and it gives us also the possibility to imagine the reconstruction of the relationship between the rivers, the city, and the inland. So the existing urban grid has the potential to become the level that connects all the others, no more only in terms of infrastructure and mobility, but also and mainly in terms of ecological and green connections. Then the third step is the image of what the city is today, a series of macro poles characterized by different aspects, different functions, and also different urban morphologies. So the regeneration strategy must take into account these different identities and must find strategies to give them value and to make them stronger and self-sufficient. The overall strategy needs to recognize them and take them as a baseline for Mykolaiv's future vision. So the resulting strategic vision for Mykolaiv's landscape and environment is the goal to create a dense green and blue network starting from the rivers and linking the existing green spaces in order to connect and enhance the different poles of Mykolaiv territory and to upgrade the quality of life. So this final image aims to represent the potential green network of the city superimposed on its different identities that must be kept and respected. So in order to reach this objective, the study of different typology case studies and best practices from around the world has been carried out. This study concerns mainly urban regeneration plans and strategies implemented by cities or neighborhoods that have the main objective of recovering the relationship between river and city, and that have many similarities with Mykolaiv urban story and urban plans, namely river city and post-industrial cities. Moreover, the case of the city of Tallinn has also been presented and studied as an exemplary city that, since the disruptive events of the last century, has reached today a relevant position in the European context from the point of view of urban nature regeneration, which was also recognized by the Green Capital Award that she won in 2021. Tips and takeaways from the Tallinn experience are, of course, the cooperation between multiple stakeholders to develop and implement the green network, the promotion and the realization of city-scale measures for the stormwater management system and the remodeling of street layouts to include nature, and finally, the inclusion of natural areas such as swamps in the green network with actions of valorization and reconnection by turning them into new biodiversity parks for the citizens. So going on, 5 different typologies of river city have been studied to understand the processes that have made them become cities that live in symbiosis with their own river and that find along the river places for recreational spaces, urban development spaces, and spaces for the health of the city and of the citizens. The main takeaways from the study, from the river cities study applicable to Mykolaiv, are as follows: to structure new development and urban transformation starting from an environmental and ecological point of view, to start a staged and multidisciplinary path to tackle environmental challenges such as flooding, to consider also public participation in all processes, and finally to include multifunctionality in every urban regeneration program that can mix ecology with accessibility, recreation, and territorial protection. Then 4 different typologies of post-industrial cities have been studied to understand how these cities have managed to integrate their industrial paths with the present needs for environmental regeneration and recovery of a network of public space dedicated to citizens. And the main takeaways from the post-industrial cities that are applicable to Mykolaiv are to find a way to restore continuity between river and city through actions and projects that foster the extension and the capillarity of public space that can find its way through the industrial pre-existences, to consider a step-by-step functional reactivation for those areas that need to be renovated, to start processes of relocation of the industrial activities that can be relocated to free up the riverfront, and finally, to consider the reactivation of the waterfront with cultural and touristic attractions that can be also linked to the industrial heritage of the city. So the vision for the regeneration of Mykolaiv's landscape has been set thanks to all the knowledge acquired from the study of these cases, and also thanks to the city analysis and to the study of global and European trends on sustainability. The vision for Mykolaiv's landscape regeneration foresees the creation and reactivation of a dense green and blue network starting from the river's regeneration, To achieve this vision, different steps are necessary, starting from the definition of objectives to address. So with this purpose, 5 main objectives for the landscape regeneration strategy of Mykolaiv have been established and are as follows: to foster the biodiversity in the whole urban environment, to respect and enhance the local and territorial ecological network, to mitigate the effects of the climate crisis, to bring people closer to nature, and finally to create a green network that can reconnect the river to the city and to the existing urban green spaces. So in order to reach these 5 objectives, actions and guidelines are proposed in the next strategic phase to build up a step-by-step strategic path to address them. So following the main objectives of the strategy, specific objectives have been established for each macro landscape system that we saw before, in order to guide the city on how to face present challenges and future ones. So following these objectives, specific actions were proposed to lead the city to address every objective. The objectives established for the first macro landscape system, the hydrographic system, include, of course, to face the flooding issue and ensure safety in high-risk zones, to regenerate the accessible waterfront areas in order to ensure access for the population and to promote them as spaces for recreation, to mitigate the great impact of existing industrial areas on the river landscape, to preserve the main naturalistic spots and areas such as wetlands as important ecosystems for the city, and finally the possible naturalization of the existing water canals that runs from the river to the agricultural inland. The specific objectives are then translated into actions on natural environment. All these actions concern intervention on elements of the city's landscape that will have to be further studied and deepened to understand the feasibility of these actions. So these actions take just as proposal useful to start a future debate with the project group and with the city. The action proposed for the hydrographic system foresee, for instance, the renaturation of water channels and parts of the riverfront, with the aim to upgrade the watercourses conditions, but also to face the challenges of flooding, giving more space to water. Also, the application of sustainable urban drainage system in planning strategy and the introduction of new floodplain basins to collect flood water and to upgrade the city's response to flooding or to great rainfall due to climate change. In order to improve the condition of waterfront areas where industrial zones seal the access to the waterfront, some actions are proposed, such as the introduction of policies to transform these industrial zones into ecologically equipped industrial areas, or the reorganization of the urban plan of the industrial areas in order to find ways to reconnect the city with the rivers by means of more ecological and public space corridors. Actions for the reconnection between river and built environment are proposed, such as the strengthening of the continuity of the green boulevard, the green axis, and also the slow mobility networks from the city to the river. And finally, also the naturalistic areas of wetlands need to be improved and preserved. And this can be done through actions of the restoration of portion of these natural habitats that have been compromised by human activities, and action of restoration of the accessibility to these areas, also to include them possibly in ecotourism routes. So for the purpose of showing how this kind of action proposed has been applied to major landscape regeneration projects, also here case studies of specific projects are presented. The case studies selected show examples of floodplain basin construction to prevent flooding events, and how these functional spaces can be also turned into livable public parks. In this research are also included examples of major urban projects where cities have applied strategies to reconnect with their rivers and to displace, remove, or integrate the infrastructural or industrial barriers with this purpose. And lately, the case studies present also strategies where natural habitats such as wetlands have been transformed into naturalistic public parks that attract many visitors every year. Then we move to the second macro environmental system, the urban green space system, where it was possible also here to formulate a series of specific objectives and strategic guidelines aimed at improving the individual condition of green spaces, but also at building a green network that can incorporate them all. The actions proposed refer mainly to those green spaces that are considered of public use, because they can, of course, be better managed by the municipality, but there are also actions proposed on a selection of semi-public or limited use green spaces, because they have a great extension in the city and they have the potential to change it. So the specific objectives established for the urban green space include the increase of public green endowment as neighborhood service, the improvement of the quality of the existing public green areas, the promotion of the green connections between existing green spaces throughout the enhancement of street greenery and the promotion of zone mobility connections, the regeneration of those that are now vacant areas by giving space to nature, and the mitigation of infrastructures by means of nature, and lastly, the implementation of the semi-public open spaces as potential spaces for the community, and the integration of nature and landscape strategy in new development areas and regeneration plots. Following the analysis of the endowment of green areas previously shown in the analytical phase, the areas for the expansion of the public green identified by the general plan have been overlapped, also applying the buffers of the 15 minutes and 5 minutes to them. What comes out from this analysis, that you can see in the map in the center of the page, is that these areas identified by the municipality allow effectively to implement the provision of public green areas within 15 minutes distance in neighborhoods that are currently not well equipped, while within the 5 minutes perspective, there are still neglected areas, mainly residential, uniformly spread in the city. It would therefore be desirable to identify more public or accessible green areas in order to achieve the goal of a healthy and green city, going beyond the amount of public green space per inhabitant. So then, for each typology of public green space identified in the analysis, actions and guidelines have been proposed to address the objectives established for the urban green space system. So let's start with the first typology, which is the forest parks. Guidelines proposed for the forest parks have the will, first of all, to upgrade the maintenance of these areas. So it is proposed the development of a maintenance plan for the city to support the management and suggest actions to be implemented over the years in these areas. Actions are proposed also for the functionality of these spaces, such as the introduction of public services in the forest parks and the increase of bicycle connections between these spaces and the urban center. Also, actions regarding their accessibility are proposed, such as the integration of exploration paths provided with a wayfinding system to make these spaces more accessible and attractive to multiple users. And finally, actions for the improvement of their biodiversity are proposed, such as the introduction of more naturalistic forestation characterized by a wide variety of native species and a more naturalistic layout of the forestation. And with this purpose, it is also suggested the creation of a list of resilient and adaptive plant species for the city to support future projects of forestation. For the public parks category, such as Liski Park and Victory Park, actions are proposed mainly to upgrade their functionality and their accessibility. The public parks of the city are in general large green spaces with many possibilities, but that often do not take full advantage of them, mainly because of the lack of accessibility or of equipment. For this reason, it is proposed to introduce routes with wayfinding system and areas that can promote people gathering and social events. And it is also suggested the development of functional programs for these spaces, which can also be developed through participatory processes of citizens' involvement. Also, the biodiversity of public parks can be improved by upgrading the current state, which is often characterized by monospecific green covers, with the introduction of plurispecific landscape formations such as meadows, rain garden, or shrubs and herbaceous stripes, which may provide a favorable environment also for pollinator insects such as bees that are very essential for the environmental and ecological balance of the city. Next category are the linear park. These are a specific category proposed for those linear, thick green spaces, mainly located in the dense central part of the city along the main street. These green areas are linear formations that are central to the road axis and offer a great potential for ecological connection and also to upgrade the public space of the city center. For these reasons, guidelines are proposed to strengthen their accessibility with the introduction of new paths, cycleways, urban furniture, and areas for new functions along them. The linear parks can also be upgraded in terms of ecosystem services with the maximization of the green cover by implementing the existing rows of trees in order to reduce the heat island in the city. And finally, they also have the possibility to become urban scale linear gardens that can catch the water runoff from the vehicular roads instead of channeling it directly into the sewer system of the city. The next category are the squares, namely the green squares that represent the identity of the city. Guidelines are suggested for their improvement in terms of functions provided, equipments, and livability of the public spaces. For instance, it is suggested here to enhance and promote the encounter of people by activating these spaces with equipment and an activation program that can be extended to the whole city. But it is also proposed to introduce measures to counteract heat island effects, such as arboretums or public fountains or refreshment spots, and to replace the materiality of the public spaces that often present impermeable pavings with more natural permeable materials in order to upgrade the water management of these public spaces and of the whole city. Then the last category of public green spaces are those identified as accessible wetlands. The wetlands, we know that are very important natural habitats for the river and for the city. Not all of them are accessible, but little portions of the public green spaces are characterized by a wetland coastal habitat. So the proposed action for accessible wetlands are related mainly to their protection and valorization through actions of renaturation and plantation of the most compromised areas because of human activities, also through the development of a maintenance plan to support the city in enhancing these protected areas and to make the citizens more aware of these habitats. Moreover, in order to protect them, it is necessary to make them accessible in a controlled way with controlled pathways and to valorize their characteristics also through informative campaigns and possible ecotourism programs. Then also semi-public spaces have been considered in the guidelines for improving the network, the green network of the city. Indeed, residential green areas are the most widespread green areas of the city and have a great potential because they represent for the citizens the first accessible green areas. Some of the various types of residential areas have been analyzed and their green spaces are the subject of the following guidelines. So the green spaces related to the apartment residential typologies that are the big linear residential blocks have a great potential to become spaces of gathering for the citizens and can be upgraded also with policies and actions such as the promotion of the cooperation between residents in maintaining the quality and safety of the shared space. Also, actions of removal, the paving or removal of impermeable paving to replace with permeable ones are proposed. And finally, actions of reconnection of the green areas of these residential complexes that are often fragmented by the infrastructural network can be promoted in order to create a shared system of neighborhood parks for the residents. Another widely spread residential typology is that of the manorial residential areas. This typology is characterized by low-story housing surrounded by a fence and a wide infrastructural space connecting them, often with green informal spaces along the streets. This typology has a great potential, both because the infrastructural areas are very large and can be equipped with sidewalks, bike paths, and green areas can become accessible green spaces for the neighborhood with various ecological and recreational shared functions. Moreover, with the objective of fostering biodiversity in the urban environment, it is also suggested to promote a list of species that can be planted also in private gardens in order to participate also as private citizens in the increase of urban biodiversity. Also, another widely spread residential typology is those of the cottages. This is a very specific typology for Mykolaiv, and the actions proposed are mostly related to the public-private balance of land use within these neighborhoods. The conditions found in the cottages neighborhoods are often ambiguous, and the walking paths are not very clear, and the riverfront occupied by these neighborhoods seems hardly accessible. So for this reason, it is proposed to clarify the pedestrian and vehicular routes in order to promote and facilitate the access to people and the pedestrian continuity towards the riverfront. Moreover, some examples of a similar typology of housing neighborhood are shown in the reference pictures in the middle of the page from the German Kleingarten, which can be an interesting example on how to treat these very complex neighborhoods. Lastly, the main road axes have been considered in the guidelines as they are very important spaces for the construction of an interconnected green network. Mykolaiv road network is widely spread and probably oversized. It currently only incorporates few street planting, lacking infiltration solution and permeable pavement. So for this reason, road green should be maximized also by taking some space from the infrastructure. Rain garden and bioswales need to be introduced in order to upgrade the actual condition that doesn't allow rainwater to infiltrate or to be cleaned up by plants. Major road access are also occasions to improve the safety of pedestrians and cyclists by offering solutions for the integration of slow mobility, improving the aesthetics and livability of the neighborhood. And it is also proposed to study possible solutions to decommission some streets of the city center or of the historical center to make them accessible only to pedestrians and bicycles to improve the livability and the attractivity of these urban areas. So finally comes the system of the border landscape, which is the last macro landscape system included in the strategic guidelines. As of today, the border landscapes constitute very big natural or semi-natural areas in the city, connecting the city to the inland. But since most of them, as reported by the municipality in our last meeting, are going to be subject of new urban developments, there will be few natural spaces left to preserve, consisting mostly in the forest habitats. Therefore, the objectives for the border landscape have been reduced to two main objectives. One is related to the enhancement and connection of the forested areas that will be preserved. And the second objective is linked to the maintenance of ecological connectivity between rivers and inland, also in consideration of new urban developments that risk stealing that ecological relationship. So also here, the specific objectives are translated into actions on natural environment. The action proposed on the border landscape foresee mainly actions to promote biodiversity in the forest environment, with reintroduction of multiple species forestation, naturalistic forestation, and renaturation actions. Also, it is suggested to make these spaces more accessible to citizens and to all visitors with trails and bicycle itineraries that can connect them to the city center. Finally, actions and guidelines are proposed as suggestions to be followed in order to preserve the ecological connectivity between rivers and inland within the planned urban development. With this purpose, it is suggested to integrate green corridors running east to west and north to south in the new development areas to preserve these connectivities. And then it is also suggested to introduce vegetated buffer strips between these new developments and the natural spaces in order to mitigate their presence. And finally, it is suggested also to promote and plan the reachability and connection through slow mobility paths and network of the new developments, also with the aim to connect them to the surrounding natural spaces. So for the purpose of showing how forested areas are being enhanced in other similar contexts around the world, also here case studies are presented. The case studies selected show examples of integrated projects that bring together the creation of accessibility networks, recreational spaces, and renaturation actions within the natural habitats of the forest. The case studies also show how major European cities are moving towards the protection, enhancement, and reconnection of their forested areas as they represent green lungs for the cities. Most renaturation projects are fostered today by the European Rewilding Network that has the objective to support rewilding projects in all Europe, and that has also already started a renaturation project of a forested area in the Kyiv region, also involving the local community and promoting educational programs. So finally, the objectives of this strategic guidelines and of this action is to lead the city towards a step-by-step landscape regeneration approach that takes into account its identities, its diversities, and its potentialities and criticalities, with the purpose to foster these diversities in order to build up a 50-minute city where all the poles of the city are self-sufficient and livable for all the citizens. The Green and Blue Network unites them all and brings health, safety, and recreation in the whole urban environment. So as said previously at the beginning, the reports related to landscape and natural environments containing this proposal and the overall strategy is going to be shared with the municipality so that we can have your feedbacks and we can have proposals from you to integrate in this first step, strategic reading. So for now, that is all. Thank you very much. Stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Margarita, for your contribution. That was great work regarding the strategies for landscape and natural environments. As of now, I would like to open the floor to our Ukrainian colleagues in case they have any comments or questions that they would like to make regarding the work that was just presented by Land.
Доброго дня, колеги.
Hello, colleagues. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your attention to all these problems and the improvement of our strategy on working with green zones. Thank you for your recommendations. They're very useful. The city of Mykolaiv is growing and developing, and it is important for us to think through how these developments, how these projects can remain green and ecological. Thank you for the case studies and examples of other river cities and post-industrial cities. We will study these examples carefully. We have a lot of challenges because of our construction projects and the current situation. But thank you again. Your input is very, very constructive and useful.
Thank you, Evgen. Thank you too.
Are there any comments or questions from other members of our Ukrainian colleagues or the press that I see is also online at the moment?
Ми також хотіли подякувати за таку презентацію.
We would also like to thank you for this presentation. We can see this is a very substantial analysis. We appreciate the fact that you pay so much attention to the green zones. This is indeed a very significant issue, which was reflected in our questionnaire. The citizens of Mykolaiv, in their answers to our questionnaire, our survey, said these questions are very important for them.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for your comments. I don't know whether Andrei Simbal would like to make any comments or whether there would like to be any closing statements from either Mayor Alexander Sienkiewicz or Dimitro Falco. Hello, Andrei.
Доброго дня. Да, я би дивіться, дійсно.
Hello. Yes, we understand that after so many years, we still lack green zones, even according to the regulations of our state legislation. So this work that you have done on analyzing our ecological situation, it's very important. So we will use it in our work on the master plan. We need to find the balance between the city industrial and housing development and the green zones. So this consolidated result will give us an understanding that our city is developing correctly in the right way. Thank you. I would also like to remind you that we will share this information on our site after we receive the recording. We will put them on our social network sites so that all people who would like to get acquainted with this work can see and hear it.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. I see that Mayor Alexander is here with us. Would you like to make a closing statement, Mayor?
Well, hello all. First of all, I was listening this speech and this presentation, and it was really impressive, the amount of work that you've done. I would agree with Andrei Simbal, with some of his statements about that the city it's not wood, or it's not a place to grow only trees and grow fish and everything. So it should be something like mixture of industrial zones, green zones, public spaces, and everything else. But I'm sure that this presentation will be very interesting for our citizens, because we hear a lot about the renovation of our green zones, public spaces, about planting new plants. And for sure, we need, what my dream is, that we will have these pines like you guys have in Rome. you know, I don't know what the name is, like Pinia or something like that. So, and we have Sister City Trieste, which I want to ask to give us a couple of these pines to see how they grow in our climate. So for sure, our city should be, it is green and it should be green. For sure, we need to make sure that all the river sides, I mean, all the river banks are used in the proper way, because now they...
Alexander, you have muted yourself. We lost you at the start of the river sides.
Sorry, where are you me about the blue zones, right? So for sure, we need to use our river banks, and because now they are not nice, they are not equipped, they are not developed, and they are not, first of all, used by people. So maybe some risky, extreme people are ready to use our beaches and let's say spend their time on the riverbanks. So yeah, for sure, the green transition, and it's a mainstream today in the world community, and for sure we need to use it in the city, in the future city planning. And today I could say that there is a biggest challenge for us, even not to rebuild the city, but to make people of the city think that they are ready to come back to their city. Because the worst problem and the biggest challenge for us will be the brain drain that I see that we'll have in the nearest time. We need to create something that will attract people to the city of Mykolaiv, because of the closeness to the border with Russia, because of the destroyed industrial potential that we had before the war. And for sure, we need to have something to attract people who will say, like, we need to live in the city of Mykolaiv because. So the answer, because, I think we will have in the end of creation of this master plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. With that closing statement, just a communication. We will now be sharing the PDF with Yevgen in order to have him and the technical team of the municipality revise it and produce comments so that we can send those back over to Land Studio. We would also like for you to make comments if anything regarding the translation has not been done correctly, so that way we can fix that, so that the document can then be being published throughout the different media channels and as well as online. With this milestone presentation, the team from Land will be going on holiday vacation for the month of August, but we hope to restart the activities once they are back from the holiday break on the month of September. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation today, and we'll be sharing the PDF with you shortly. I think that with that, we may adjourn the meeting. So stay safe, everybody. Have a good evening.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Дякуємо, до побачення.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Arrivederci.
Bye, thank you.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Ci vediamo. Ci vediamo.